My mother took a liking to the American saying, "You are what you eat." In her case, it certainly seemed to be true. Thick red-orange mala sauce and pepper oiled simmered just beneath the surface of her words. Hot numbing spices lingered at the tip of her tongue, like they did whenever I went back home to China between semesters. When she would cook for me like she was trying to put the Sichuan summer back in my belly. She would wear purple latex gloves she brought back from her chemical lab, and use them like they were household cleaning gloves. "Your father brought Yi Feng home today," she said. Between the tinny distortions over the phone and her accent, it almost sounded like she wasn't speaking English at all. "Yi Feng," I said. "That's a good name." "A very pretty baby boy. He's going to grow up good and strong. He's already been weaned off of the orphanage food." "I can't wait to see him next year." "What about grad school?" "Mom." "Put it off and you'll miss your chance, Yiling. This is your prime. You need to." I know. I just..." "Don't cut me off," she said. "You need a list, okay? Only the best schools in the US. Maybe this time you'll finally make it into Harvard or Yale." Those words stung a little, an old pain that I had mostly gotten over. "Yale isn't even a good engineering school," I muttered. "Make a list, okay?" "I need to go to class soon." "This is more important than class. Make a list and send it to me so your father and I can take a look, okay? And no Google emails this time. It doesn't work in China." "Mom, I don't want to go to grad school." She went quiet. The mala sauce was beginning to bubble. "Yiling, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You need to aim higher. Stop thinking this is enough, or else you'll turn into a nobody." "That's not what I'm thinking." "That's what it sounds like," she said. "I'm going to class." "Send me the list by tomorrow." "I'm not sending you a list. I'm already tired of school. Bye, Mom." "Yiling." I hung up. Something boiled deep down in my stomach. Maybe I had some of that Sichuan in me too. I went to UC Berkeley, which was a pretty good school according to anybody but my parents. My mother loved to say that I only got in thanks to Lee, the tutor I had when I was in high school back in China. I hated when she brought up Lee, not because she wasn't a nice person, because she was. She would bring me little cups of flan from the nearby bakery, because she felt like it, and she would talk to me when I was feeling down. She would text me cheesy jokes she had heard and we would gossip about her other students. No, I only hated talking about Lee because she was dead. My mother didn't let me go to her funeral because I had exams the day after, but I did get to visit her in the hospital, oxygen masked and bandaged up as she slowly drifted around the realms of unconsciousness. A traffic accident, they said. Lee was one of those painfully rare people who were both kind and smart. I felt a little bit of pride when I had gotten my acceptance letter from Berkeley, because she had gotten her master's degree from there. Maybe I could be just like her. Sometimes when I sat in the lecture halls, I wondered if Lee had sat there too. Unfortunately, I found most of my classes exceptionally boring. This Wednesday afternoon lecture was especially bad. It didn't help that I had eaten lunch just before walking into the lecture hall, or that I had stayed up late that night before playing video games. As I sat in my creaky plastic chair, I felt myself slowly drifting off, as the robotically monotone Professor Lancaster droned on. My pencil dawdled between the lines of my notebook. The equations were a foreign script. I tried to entertain myself by watching the girl in the front row fix her rainbow-colored hair. But my vision blurred in and out of focus as I tried to keep my head straight and my eyes open. It was a fight to stay awake and I was losing fast. In an instant, the world around me winked out. When I awakened again, something was different. It took me a good while to realize what. First, I noticed that the girl with the rainbow hair was missing. And then I noticed that the obnoxiously large backpack that had been pressing against the side of my leg was gone too. Filling up the rows and rows of seats were nothing but strangers. My first thought was that I had somehow managed to sleep through the rest of class, everyone packing up and leaving, and the next class filling in. But then I looked at the front of the hall. Standing at the small raised platform in front of the blackboards was Professor Lancaster, droning on about ordinary differential equations in that same monotone voice. I looked down at my desk. There was a large yellow notepad on it. There were notes between the lines, written in neat, looping handwriting that I could never replicate. I sat there in confusion for a few moments, eyeing the unfamiliar faces all around me and the strange notes. And then something at the back of the classroom made a clack, and the world winked out again. There was a stinging at the back of my throat. I blinked and I looked around. I was still in the lecture hall. Everyone was in motion around me, slamming their folding desks back into the armrests of the chairs and packing their backpacks. At the front of the classroom, the girl with rainbow hair bounced to her feet and skipped up the stairs to join the entourage out the exit. "Miss Zhu," I yelped. Standing by my seat was Professor Lancaster. "Yes, hi. I wasn't sure if you had heard me the first time. I would like to see you at my office." "What?" I fidgeted in my seat. Is it because I fell asleep?" Lancaster smiled thinly, making wrinkles around his eyes. "This isn't high school, Yi Ling." I didn't even know that he knew my name. "Then what is it?" "Follow me." Somewhat bewildered, I packed up my things and I followed him out of the lecture hall. A couple of students glanced at us as they filed out. We walked down the concrete hallways and up a flight of stairs. I twiddled my thumbs as we walked. "Am I in trouble?" "No. I simply wanted to offer you a research opportunity." "A research opportunity?" "At the lab that I work at, yes. We are making a big push for new personnel, and we could use some bright-minded undergraduates." "Professor, I barely have a B in your class." "I know. And my GPA is only a 3.6 something." "I know that too. And I fell asleep in class today." Lancaster took a bundle of keys from his pocket and opened one of the white steel doors lining the hallway, with a plaque that read, "Berkeley Lab for Cerebral Recycling." Inside was a white room crammed all around with bookshelves and filing cabinets. We entered and Lancaster sat at his desk. "Yes, I know, Yi Ling, but schoolwork and grades aren't the only bars that measure your potential. I feel like you could be a very valuable addition to our team. I've never done any kind of research before. I don't even know what the stuff on the side means." Lancaster took out a yellow manila folder from his desk drawer. He tipped it open and he studied the contents. "The lab studies a new technology called Cerebral Recycling," he said. "It is a concept somewhere between bioengineering and neuroscience. Neither of those sound like the kind of work that I know how to do." "Yes, I am aware. Give me a moment to explain." The process of committing information to long-term memory is rather roundabout and inefficient. As I'm sure you've realized by your studies, the brain is terribly prone to forgetting things that you don't study often enough. I nodded. Now, Lancaster continued, imagine you were able to record information into your brain without the repeated sensory stimuli. Imagine you could simply take the information you need from someone who already possesses it in their long-term memory and transfer it to yourself. Like you're downloading knowledge straight into your brain, sort of like in a sci-fi movie. Exactly, and at a very quick rate too. Now, think about this. If we could distill somebody's memories down to their store of worldly knowledge they acquired over the course of their life, and transport that into another human being. At this moment, the world flashed again. I caught my breath as a wave of vertigo ripped at the edges of my vision, the ceiling lights blinking out and then blinking back in. The bookshelves behind Lancaster were much sparser, the folders not as full. The back of my tongue tasted like Szechuan pepper. And then the lights blinked out again and then back in. The bookshelves were back to normal. Their intellect could live on, even after they died. I glanced around the room and then at Lancaster. He didn't seem to notice the flashing. Going back to your comment about science fiction, he continued, oblivious. Cerebral recycling is more than just imagination and theory. It has been tested and verified. And this is part of the reason why I think you would be a valuable addition to my lab, ever since your parents first contacted me. I frowned. My parents? Yes, at the beginning of the semester, this technology was first conceptualized by your mother. My mom works at a chemical lab. She makes liquid soaps. Ah, Lancaster said. So, you don't know yet. It's understandable. Your tutor, Lee. How do you know about Lee? She was my student 6 years ago, and she was also one of the first test subjects for cerebral recycling. Your mother probably didn't want you to know. You see, the reason why we call it recycling is that the brain of the knowledge donor is processed into an organic slurry. Wait, I stammered. Wait, what? It was unfortunate, Yi Ling, but your parents only wanted the best for you. But they believed that you could be smarter than Lee, Lancaster said, and that's why they fed her brain to you. The stinging sensation that came next was cold. Cold and then colder, spreading into my bloodstream from a fine point at the back of my neck, like it had been pierced with a needle. The cold mixed poorly with the Szechuan summer simmering in my stomach, and the bits of Lee that were swirling my brain. They called me earlier today, Lancaster said, his voice rapidly receding, as people I never knew were behind me began to pick my limp body up out of the chair. They think that your differential equations could do better inside the minds of a new child prodigy. I came to in a cold, dark, concrete world. I could sense the tons of rocks above my head and smell the old, stale air. I was deep, deep underground. My joints were stiff, like I had been out for a long time. I tried to take one step. I collapsed to my knees and I vomited. The diffuse blue-gray light reflected off the puddle of slimy bile as it spread slowly over the concrete floor. Careful, a man's voice said as I tried to cough out the pounding headache. Your brain's loosened up. Sudden movement will disorient your sensory perception. I whipped my head around, sending the world spinning wildly around me. Through the swirling gray fuzz, Professor Lancaster slowly came into focus. "What are you doing?" I choked out. "Where am I?" "Don't worry," he said, buttoning his lab coat. "You're closer to home here. The US government is awfully stingy about scientific research, so we transport the bulk of our testing resources to the lab in China." "You..." My voice echoed tenfold in my head. Everything was dizzying. Footsteps approached. I couldn't tell how many there were. Anywhere from 1 to 100. "Is it ready?" a new voice said. I panted. My palms were slick with sweat. I raised my head slowly. Slowly. I thought that I was prepared for the worst, but I wasn't. My heart twisted. "Yiling," my father said. "You need to stay calm and move slowly." My mother nodded. There was too little light to see if there were tears in her eyes. "What's going on?" "I thought Professor Lancaster gave you the details." "You are..." I swallowed, nearly choking on the sickly sweet film coating the inside of my mouth. Lancaster's words rushed back. "What did you do to Lei?" "You could have used her knowledge, Yiling," my mother said. "You had the exams." "You said that she died in an accident." "You were a child. I couldn't tell you." "You killed her." Something made an ear-splitting clang in the darkness, and a stark blue light flooded the basement lab. When the burning spots cleared from my eyes, I was staring into a glowing glass chamber, a cubicle with shining metal edges and blinking buttons on the outside. At its center was a single chair. The world blinked in and out. I found myself staring into the glass chamber with fewer lights and fewer screens, but it was the same glass chamber. Reflected in the glass was Lei's face, teary-eyed and slack with fear, and behind it, my parents and Professor Lancaster. A tail end of a voice echoed in the deep dark reaches of the lab. Lei's voice pleading for mercy. And then the world blinked again and I was back to being Yiling, holding on to the shredded memories of a life stolen away. I braced my hands in the glass to steady myself, and I looked back at my parents. Warm tears trickled down my cheeks. "Is this because I couldn't get into Harvard or Yale?" "No," my mother said. "It's only because we want the best for you." "I want to live," I whimpered. "What you want and what you need are often different. Adults who have been through the walks of life understand this." I slid to the cold hard floor and I sobbed because I couldn't do anything else. Professor Lancaster brushed past me, opened the door to the glass chamber and walked inside. "My brother," I whispered. "Will he get my memories?" "All your knowledge," my mother said. "And Lei's." "I don't have all of Lei's knowledge." "The distillation process wasn't perfect back then," Lancaster said, inspecting the metal edges from inside the glass cube. "There were some glitches, some losses, some impurities like sensations and emotions that might be triggered with the right stimuli. And now the process is complete, and your brother will be grateful to have had you as a sister." "He won't know," I muttered. "Would he?" "Maybe when he grows up he will," my mother said. Lancaster motioned for my parents to join him. I stared after them as they entered the glass chamber and walked over to the corner where Lancaster was pointing. "Some oxidation on the welds," he said. "You think this might introduce trace chemicals into the formula?" No, my mother replied. Not nearly enough to affect its performance. The world blinked and I was Lee again. Lancaster was standing right behind me. I kicked and screamed as he half carried, half dragged me into the glass chamber and strapped me inside into a chair with thick leather belts. He then fastened a bulky rubber vessel around my neck and stuck the plastic tube coming out of it into my nose. "Now stay still," he said. "This will only hurt for a second." I watched through silent tears as Lancaster exited the chamber, closing the door behind him. "We're ready," he said, his voice muffled through the glass. My parents nodded, peering into the chamber at me. "This is for our daughter," my father said. "Thank you." My mother walked over to a rectangular device with blinking lights and pressed a series of buttons. The glass box filled with a shrill hum, growing louder and louder until it was finally unbearable. I twisted in my bonds and I screamed almost as loud as everything around me. My bones trembled under my skin, and my eyes felt like they were going to explode. As I began to feel my brain slowly churn inside my skull, I found myself holding on too tightly to two memories, holding them closer than ever before. Like I said before, Lee was incredibly rare in that she was both kind and smart. The first memory was of us laughing together, eating flan out of little cups and making fun of her Saturday student. The second was a series of 4 numbers. Assuming the buttons were arranged in a standard number pad, and assuming the last button was to confirm activation of this glass chamber. Based on the motion of her hand, the code my mother had typed in had to be 0617. 0617 for June 17th, the birthday of her beloved daughter. The world blinked out and then back in. I was Yi Ling, curled up by the glass chamber as my parents and Lancaster walked around inside. I shoved myself to my feet, and fighting my vertigo, I threw my body against the door, slamming it shut. I heard muffled shouts of alarm. My fingers fumbled at the numpad. The little rubbery buttons first felt like jello and then like needles. If there was anything happening inside of the chamber, I couldn't hear it anymore. My vision blurred and all I could see were the buttons. 0617. Enter. A soft whine filled the air. I collapsed, retching my guts out and waiting for hands to grab me and throw me into the horrific screeching in the glass chamber that Lee had heard. But nobody came. When my vision returned, I slowly turned my head to the inside of the glass chamber. Crumpled up on the floor and against the door, hands outstretched and mouths open wide, were 3 figures, twisted and frozen in place. A pool of thick sludge was forming under their bodies. I watched for what felt like hours. My vertigo slowly receded to the point where I could see that their skin was rippling, violent standing waves stretching their pale cheeks and eyelids. The sludge was pouring out of their nostrils. I watched the little chunks slide out each time their skin trembled. First, it was pink and gray, and then it was a smooth, sticky red. Numbly, I pulled myself to my feet and I entered the code into the number pad again. The screen that I never realized was there lit up. Disengage? I pressed enter. Slowly, the whining noise began to fade. I thought for a long time about whether I wanted to tell this story. In the end, my parents were right. Adults who had been through the walk of life to understand more than immature kids. When it came down to it, family mattered more than anything else. It was one of the most important duties of a parent to ensure that their child could live the best life that he could. On the way, there were always sacrifices, unimaginable sacrifices. But parental love always prevailed. I know all of this because I know of the collective wisdom of 3 very intelligent, very accomplished adults within me now. I ate them. My mother was right to put Lee's brain slurry into dishes soaked in rich spices and Szechuan pepper, because they didn't taste very good off the floor. But once I started, it was hard to stop. I could feel every bit of it nourishing my mind, little by little, filling it up like a helium balloon. Even with the knowledge of 4 people, I have a hard time puzzling out why I did it. Maybe the drug Lancaster's lab workers injected in me hadn't quite worn off yet. Or maybe it was the trauma that had numbed my ability to make decisions, like Mala had numbed my tongue. The most plausible theory for me, though, is that I was simply curious. You see, curiosity is what has historically driven the greatest human advancements. Only when one is brave enough to inquire and take risks does one discover. Curiosity is what makes humans tick. It's what makes us feel alive and also what kills us from time to time. Like in the case of my parents in Lancaster. They were embodiments of this great human quest for knowledge. The small daring steps to learn about this vast universe around us and its endless possibilities. It would be disrespectful of me to let their lives' work go to waste. I intend to continue it.